They called her lame and left her for dead, until a lonely rich rancher found her crawling and changed her life. Winter came down early that year, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet weight pressing itself into the land until even the hills seemed to hunch their shoulders against it. Snow had been falling since before dawn, thin, dry flakes that didn't melt when they touched the ground, only layered themselves one over another like the world was being slowly buried on purpose. Ethan Hale rode fence alone, the way he did most mornings. The ranch stretched wide and empty beneath a pale sky, the kind of gray that never promised anything better. His horse moved slow, breath puffing white, hooves crunching through frozen grass, and old snow crusted hard as bone. Ethan didn't rush winter. You learned that young out here. Rush it, and it punished you. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, built by years of lifting hay bales and fixing what storms broke. Wealth had come later, land bought cheap from men who couldn't last, cattle multiplied quietly, investments made with patience instead of hope. Folks in the nearest town called him rich now. Some said lonely, like it was an explanation. Both were true. The cold made his knees ache where an old injury never healed right. He shifted in the saddle, gloved hand tightening on the reins, eyes scanning the fence line for breaks. That's when he saw something dark near the ravine. At first, he thought it was a calf, then maybe a coyote dragged down by hunger. Winter made corpses common. But it moved, not standing, not walking, crawling. Ethan slowed his horse, heart tightening in that quiet way that comes before fear has a name. He dismounted carefully, boots sinking into snow, rifle slung but untouched. The ravine cut shallow but sharp through the land, wind curling inside it like breath through cracked teeth. At the bottom, half covered by snow and dead grass, a girl dragged herself forward on her elbows. She was thin, too thin. One leg twisted wrong behind her, useless, trailing through the snow like it belonged to someone else. Her coat, if it had ever been a coat, was torn open, stuffing spilled, fabric stiff with ice. Dark hair clung to her face, lashes white with frost. She made no sound, not crying, not calling, just breathing, short, shallow breaths that looked like they might stop at any moment if the cold pressed a little harder. Ethan froze. People didn't end up out here by accident, not in winter, not like this. He took one step closer. Snow crunched loud in the quiet. Her head lifted instantly, eyes snapped open, wide, dark, terrified. She tried to scramble back, arms shaking, palms slipping in the snow. The movement sent a sharp tremor through her body, and she collapsed again, teeth clenching hard enough Ethan could hear it. "Hey," he said without thinking. His voice sounded wrong in the cold, too deep, too sudden. Her gaze locked onto him like he was a gun already fired. He raised both hands slowly, palms open, the universal sign of, "I won't hurt you, even when no one believes it." "I'm not gonna touch you," he said, softer now. "You're freezing. That's all I see." She stared at him, didn't blink. Her lips were blue, one cheek bruised deep purple. The skin split where blood had dried and frozen. Her hands, God, her hands were bare, red, cracked, trembling uncontrollably. Ethan swallowed. He had seen men die slow, seen animals suffer, but this was neglect sharpened into cruelty. "Can you talk?" he asked. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. She shook her head once, fast, almost angry, then tried again to move, dragging herself toward the ravine wall like she planned to climb it with broken hope. Her bad leg refused. Ethan stepped forward before he could overthink it, shrugging out of his heavy coat. Cold sliced through him immediately, but he didn't stop. "Easy," he said, kneeling a careful distance away. "I won't pick you up without asking." That made her pause. She stared at the coat in his hands like it might bite. "I'm Ethan," he added, because silence was dangerous. "This is my land. There's a house about a mile that way, fire, food." Her eyes flicked past him, searching the ridge, the trees, the open white fields. Someone had taught her to expect worse. "They called me lame," she whispered suddenly. Her voice was hoarse, barely there, like sound dragged through ice. Ethan stilled. "Who did?" She laughed once. It came out broken. "Everyone. Then her strength gave out. She sagged forward, palms sinking into snow, head dropping like a weight too heavy to hold. Ethan moved then. No more distance, no more careful pauses. He wrapped the coat around her shoulders, thick wool swallowing her small frame, and this time she didn't fight. Her body shook violently as warmth touched skin that had gone too long without it. "I've got you," he said, low and certain. "I won't leave you here." Her fingers twitched, then caught the edge of his sleeve, barely holding on. "Please," she breathed. "Don't put me back." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I won't." He lifted her slowly, supporting her broken leg, adjusting until she didn't cry out. She weighed almost nothing. It terrified him more than if she'd been heavy. As he carried her toward the horse, snow falling thicker now, Ethan felt something shift inside his chest, something old and dangerous and alive. Winter had given him many things over the years, but this felt like a test. The ride back to the house was slow. Ethan walked beside the horse instead of mounting. One arm braced around the girl's back, the other steadying her twisted leg so it wouldn't jolt against the saddle. She leaned into him without protest, her weight uneven, breath shallow and sharp each time the wind cut through the ravine. Snow thickened as they moved uphill. The world narrowed to white ground, gray sky, the steady sound of hooves and Ethan's boots breaking crust. She didn't look at him anymore. Her eyes stayed half-closed, lashes rimed with ice, lips pressed tight, like she was afraid a sound might steal what little strength she had left. By the time the ranch house came into view, a low, wide structure crouched against the land like it knew better than to stand tall. Her shivering had turned weak, irregular. That scared him. Ethan pushed the door open with his shoulder and ushered her inside fast, the warmth hitting them both like a wall. The fire he banked every morning still burned low in the hearth, orange coals breathing softly. The girl made a small sound then. Not pain. Relief. Her knees buckled. Ethan caught her, easing her down onto the old couch near the fire, piling blankets over her without asking. Wool, flannel, anything within reach. She curled in on herself instinctively, shoulders hunched, one hand gripping the blanket like it might disappear. "You're safe," he said again, quieter now. "Nobody's coming." She shook her head faintly. "They always do." He didn't argue. Out here, promises meant nothing until they survived the night. Ethan filled a kettle and set it on the stove, hands moving on instinct. He grabbed dry clothes from the spare trunk, his late mother's old nightgown, thick socks, a sweater soft from years of careful keeping. When he turned back, she was watching him, not afraid now, wary. Her eyes tracked every movement like she was cataloging exits, weapons, danger. Her jaw clenched when he stepped closer. "I need to change your clothes," he said gently. "They're frozen. You'll lose heat fast." Silence stretched. Then, barely audible, "Don't look." "I won't," he promised. "I'll turn around." He did, gave her space, gave her time. The only sounds were the fire crackling and the rustle of fabric as she struggled, one leg useless, movements awkward and slow. Once, she hissed through her teeth when pain flared. Ethan stayed still, counted breaths. When she whispered, "I'm done," it sounded like she'd run a mile. He turned back. She was swaddled in the nightgown and sweater, hair loose over her shoulders, face pale but no longer blue. The socks were mismatched. One had a hole at the toe. She noticed him noticing and flushed faintly, eyes dropping. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I can't. My leg." "Doesn't matter," he interrupted, firm but kind. "Sit." He knelt carefully in front of her, keeping his movements slow and visible, and gently lifted her injured leg onto a stool. The knee was swollen, twisted slightly inward. Old injury, not fresh. "Did someone do this to you?" he asked. She hesitated. "No," she said. "Not exactly." He waited. "I was born like this," she added. "They said I'd slow them down." They. Ethan didn't ask who, he could guess. He warmed water and cleaned the cuts on her hands, wrapping them in cloth. His touch was steady, respectful, like he'd learned a long time ago how fragile people could be without meaning to be. She watched his hands like they might betray him. "They called me Lame May," she said suddenly, staring at the fire. Like it was my name. Said I was dead weight. Said winter would finish what they didn't. Her voice didn't break. That was worse. Ethan swallowed hard. What's your real name? He asked. She hesitated longer this time. Maybelle, she said, but nobody used it. Well, Ethan said quietly, tying off the bandage. I will. She looked at him then. Really looked. Something in her expression shifted. Not trust, not yet, but surprise, thin and sharp as a crack in ice. He stood and poured her a mug of broth, guiding it carefully into her hands. Drink, he said. Slow. She obeyed, sipped small and careful, like she was afraid it might be taken away. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the windows, snow piling against the walls. Winter pressed in harder, determined. Ethan pulled a chair close and sat where she could see him. I live alone, he said. No hired hands in winter. Nearest town's 2 hours by horse. You can stay as long as you need. Her fingers tightened around the mug. Why? She asked. It wasn't accusation. It was confusion. Ethan stared into the fire, jaw working. Because I found you alive, he said finally. And that ought to mean something. She nodded once, absorbing it like a fact, not a kindness. Later, when exhaustion dragged her under, despite her best efforts, Ethan covered her again and dimmed the lamps. He slept in the chair, boots on, rifle nearby, not because he feared her, but because the world had taught him winter didn't forgive softness. In the night she cried, not loud, just small broken sounds she tried to swallow. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. He just stayed awake, listening, making sure the fire didn't die. Outside, the snow kept falling, and somewhere between the cold pressing in and the warmth stubbornly holding, 2 lives shifted, quietly, irreversibly, toward something neither of them had planned. Morning came slow and colorless. The storm had passed in the night, leaving the world wrapped in a heavy, unmoving silence. Snow lay thick against the windows, piled high along the porch rail, softening the land into something almost gentle, almost forgiving, almost. Ethan woke with his neck stiff and his joints aching from the chair. The fire had burned down to embers, still warm enough to hold the room together. He rose quietly, careful not to wake her. Maybelle slept curled on her side, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, the blankets drawn tight around her shoulders. Her breathing was steadier now. Color had returned faintly to her lips. For the first time since he found her, she looked her age, young. Ethan turned away before the weight of that settled too deep. He added wood to the fire, set water to boil, moved through the kitchen with the practiced silence of a man used to being alone. Outside, the cattle would need checking, the fences inspected for breaks under the snow. Winter never paused for mercy, but neither did he. When he came back inside with snow still clinging to his coat, she was awake, watching. She stiffened when she saw him, instinct flaring, then forced herself still. That effort alone told him how long she'd lived braced for harm. Morning, he said softly. She nodded once. Didn't know if you'd still be here, she admitted. Ethan set a bowl of oatmeal on the table, steam rising. Didn't know if you'd believe I would be. She considered that, then carefully pushed herself upright, wincing as her bad leg protested. He moved toward her without thinking, then stopped short, catching himself. Need help? He asked instead. Yes, she said after a moment. But ask first. He nodded. Always. He supported her elbow while she shifted, his grip firm but light. When she was settled at the table, he slid the bowl closer and placed a spoon in her hand. She ate slowly, quietly. After a few bites, she spoke. You don't stare. Ethan blinked. At what? At my leg, she said. Or my hands. Or me. He shrugged, uncomfortable. Don't see much point. She huffed a faint laugh, surprised. Everyone else does. Silence settled again, but it wasn't sharp this time. It felt tentative, like ice learning whether it could hold weight. Later that morning, Ethan brought out a set of crutches he'd made years ago after injuring his knee, a rough, sturdy pair carved from ash wood. He adjusted them carefully, testing the height. They're not pretty, he said, but they'll hold. Maybelle stared at them like they were something unreal. No one's ever... She stopped, swallowed. Thank you. He showed her how to use them, stayed close without hovering. She moved awkwardly at first, muscles weak from neglect and cold, but stubbornness burned bright beneath it. Each step left her breathless. But she didn't quit. When she nearly fell, she laughed, sharp, startled, then clapped a hand over her mouth like she'd done something wrong. Ethan smiled before he could stop himself. Winter deepened over the following days. Snow fell again, lighter this time, drifting like ash across the fields. The world outside shrank, forcing them inward into shared space and quiet routines. Maybelle learned the rhythms of the house, where the floor creaked, how the kettle sang just before boiling, which window caught the most light. Ethan learned hers. She hated sudden noise, startled at raised voices, even his, when he forgot himself cursing a stubborn hinge. She slept light, waking at the smallest sound, eyes sharp until she recognized where she was. At night, she kept the lamp burning. Ethan didn't comment. On the fourth day, she asked about his limp. Old break, he said. Didn't set right. Does it hurt? Sometimes. She nodded, understanding more than he'd said. On the sixth day, she followed him into the barn for the first time, the air sharp with hay and cold iron. The animals eyed her curiously. One horse snorted, stamping. They don't care, Ethan said. They only notice how you treat them. She reached out, hesitant, and the mare leaned into her touch, like she'd been waiting for it. Maybelle's eyes shone. That night, over stew thick with potatoes, she spoke again of before. They said I was bad luck, she said quietly. Said I'd bring hunger if I stayed. Ethan stirred his bowl. And do you believe them? She hesitated. I did, for a long time. And now? She looked around, the fire, the walls, the man across from her, who never once looked at her like she was a burden. No, she said. Now I don't. Something shifted then. Not love. Not yet. But possibility. Winter stretched on, the days short, the nights long and deep. One evening, as wind howled outside and the house creaked under the weight of snow, Maybelle asked, Why don't you have anyone here? Ethan's spoon paused mid-air. Used to, he said. A long time ago. She waited. My wife, he continued, died in childbirth. Winter storm. Couldn't get help in time. I'm sorry, she said, voice soft. He nodded, eyes fixed on the fire. So was I. They sat with that. Later, when the lamp burned low and the fire whispered instead of roared, Maybelle spoke again. They said I'd never be chosen, she said, that no one would want me. Ethan looked at her then, really looked. She met his gaze, steady now. They were wrong, he said. The words landed heavy, honest. Outside, winter pressed its face to the glass, listening, and inside, something fragile and fierce took root, not despite the cold, but because of it. Winter hardened after that, not in storms this time, but in temperature, cold so sharp it felt like glass in the lungs, the kind that made trees creak at night and split fence posts clean through if you weren't watching. Ethan split wood every morning before sunrise, breath steaming, muscles burning. He didn't complain. He'd learned long ago that winter didn't bargain. Maybelle watched from the doorway at first, wrapped in layers too big for her, hair braided loosely down her back. After a few days, she insisted on helping. I can stack, she said, gripping her crutches like a challenge. He hesitated. It's slippery. So is everything, she replied. I'm tired of sitting still. He didn't argue after that. They found a rhythm. Ethan chopped. She stacked close to the wall, slow but careful, resting when she needed to. Her cheeks flushed pink from the cold, eyes bright in a way they hadn't been before. One morning she slipped. It happened fast. Crutch sliding on ice, balance gone. Ethan dropped the axe and caught her before she hit the ground. Her hands fisted in his coat, breath hitching. For a moment, neither of them moved. She was warm against him, solid, real. I've got you, he said automatically. She nodded, but didn't pull away right away. When she finally did, her face was flushed for reasons that had nothing to do with cold. "Sorry," she murmured. "Don't be," he said, voice rougher than he meant. That night, something changed. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a confession. It was smaller, quieter. Ethan woke to find her sitting by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the flames like she was listening to something only she could hear. "Nightmare?" he asked. She nodded. "Same one. Want to talk about it?" She shook her head. "If I do, it feels real again." He understood that too well, so he sat beside her, close enough their shoulders touched, not touching more than that. She leaned into him without comment. Her head fit against his shoulder like it belonged there. He didn't move for a long time. As the weeks passed, Maybelle grew stronger, not whole, not healed the way stories like to pretend, but steadier. Her hands stopped shaking. Her laughter came easier, surprising both of them when it happened. She learned to cook, leaning on the counter when her leg ached, learned the names of the cattle, the habits of the horses, learned where Ethan kept things without asking. Ethan learned how she liked her tea, learned the sound she made when she was thinking too hard, learned that she hummed quietly when she was content. The town came up once. "People will notice," she said one evening, poking at the fire with a stick. "Me being here." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "They won't be kind." "Probably not." She swallowed. "I don't want to be trouble." Ethan turned to her fully then. "You aren't. That's easy for you to say." He leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "Maybelle, if I was worried about what people thought, I'd have lived my life different a long time ago." She studied his face. "You don't owe me this." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I want to," he said simply. That stopped her. Winter dragged toward its deepest point. Night stretched long and heavy, stars sharp as pins in the sky. Snow piled high enough to cut them off from town entirely for days at a time. One night, the fire went low. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters, cold seeping in through every crack. Ethan was halfway across the room with more wood when Maybelle suddenly gasped. He turned. She was shaking, hard, face pale, eyes unfocused. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." He was at her side instantly. "Maybelle, look at me." She didn't seem to hear him. "It's happening again," she breathed. "They're here. I can't—" Ethan knelt, took her hands firmly. "Maybelle, you're here. With me. Look." Her eyes flicked to his face, wild, then slowly, focused. "I won't let them hurt you," he said. "Not now. Not ever." Her breath hitched. Tears spilled over hot and sudden. And "I'm so tired," she sobbed. "I'm so tired of being afraid." He pulled her into his arms without asking this time. She clung to him like she'd been waiting for permission her whole life. They stayed like that for a long time, her sobs easing into shuddering breaths, his chin resting against her hair. He didn't try to fix anything, didn't promise impossible things. He just stayed. When she finally pulled back, eyes red, voice small, she said, "If you ever ask me to leave, I don't think I could." "I won't," he said, no hesitation. She searched his face for doubt and found none. That night, she slept in the bed for the first time. Ethan took the chair again. But in the dark, when the wind screamed outside and the house creaked under the weight of winter, she reached out blindly and found his hand. He didn't pull away. Winter held them both in its grip, cold and relentless, but inside that small house, something warmer than survival was beginning to take shape, something that refused to be buried. Winter broke the way it always did, quietly, without ceremony. No sudden warmth, no grand thaw, just mornings where the ice loosened its grip enough to drip, slow and steady, from the eaves. Just afternoons where the sun lingered a little longer, like it was considering staying. Ethan noticed it first in the cattle, less restlessness, more patience. Then in the land itself, the snow pulling back inch by inch, revealing dark earth beneath like a truth finally allowed to surface. Maybelle noticed it in herself. Her strength returned unevenly, but it returned. She could stand longer now without shaking. She moved through the house with more certainty, crutches clicking a familiar rhythm against the floor. Some days the pain flared hard enough to make her grit her teeth and go quiet. Other days, she surprised herself by forgetting it altogether. Those were the days Ethan liked best. Not because she didn't hurt, but because she forgot she was supposed to. One afternoon, she stood at the window, watching meltwater run through the yard in thin silver lines. "I used to think winter was punishment," she said, "like the world trying to erase me." Ethan leaned against the doorframe. "And now?" She smiled faintly. "Now I think it was hiding me until I was ready." He didn't answer. He just watched her. This woman the world had discarded and winter had sharpened instead of killing. Town became unavoidable as spring threatened. Supplies ran low. Fence posts needed replacing. People would notice if he kept avoiding them. Maybelle knew it too. "I can stay here," she offered one morning, too casually. "You don't have to bring me." Ethan set his coffee down harder than he meant to. "I'm not hiding you," he said. Her eyes lifted. Hope flickered, and fear right behind it. "They'll stare. Let them. They'll talk. They always do. They'll call me." He crossed the room in 2 strides and crouched in front of her, taking her hands gently but firmly. "They'll call you Maybelle," he said, "because that's your name." Her throat worked. "And if they don't? Then they'll answer to me." The town looked the same as it always had. Muddy streets, low buildings, the smell of smoke and livestock. But to Maybelle, it felt like stepping onto foreign ground without armor. People stared, some with curiosity, some with recognition, some with that old, familiar cruelty sharpened by boredom. She kept her chin up anyway. Ethan walked beside her, matching her pace, his presence solid and unmistakable. A few men tipped their hats. A few women whispered. One man laughed under his breath. Ethan stopped walking. The laugh died fast. By the time they reached the general store, Maybelle's hands were trembling, but she hadn't backed down, not once. Inside, the shopkeeper paused mid-count. "Well," he said slowly, "didn't know you had company, Hale." "I do," Ethan replied evenly. The man's gaze slid to Maybelle's leg, lingered. Ethan stepped closer. "This is Maybelle," he said. "She's with me." Something in his tone made the shopkeeper nod without argument. Outside, Maybelle let out a breath she'd been holding for years. "You didn't let them," she said softly. "Didn't let them what? Decide who I was." Ethan looked at her then, really looked. That was never their right. Spring came slow but sure. Grass pushed through melting snow. Calves were born. The land exhaled. One evening, as the sky burned gold and the air smelled of thawed earth, Maybelle stood at the fence, watching Ethan work. He moved with the ease of someone shaped by the land, every motion purposeful. "I don't want to be a guest anymore," she said when he joined her. He frowned. "You never were." "I mean it," she pressed. "I want to stay, really stay, work, belong." "You already do." She shook her head. "Not like that." Silence stretched between them, full and dangerous. Then she met his eyes. "I know I'm broken," she said quietly. "I know I'm not what people expect." Ethan's jaw tightened. "But I also know this," she continued. "I'm alive, and I choose where I stand now." She took a breath. "If you'll have me, not out of pity, not out of rescue, but because you want me, I'll stay." Ethan didn't answer right away. He thought of winter, of finding her half dead in the snow, of the nights she cried and the mornings she laughed, of the way the house felt different now, full, warm, alive. "I don't want saving," she added softly. "I want choosing." He reached for her, hands framing her face, thumbs brushing away a tear she hadn't noticed falling. "Maybelle," he said, voice rough, "I chose you the moment you grabbed my sleeve and asked me not to put you back." Her breath caught. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was gentle, uncertain, real. Not a promise of forever, but an agreement to try. That night, she slept beside him, not clinging, not afraid, just there. Spring bloomed fully after that. Maybelle learned the land the way Ethan had, patiently, honestly. She worked the garden, trained the younger horses, found ways to move that didn't hurt as much. Some days were harder than others. Some nights, the memories came back sharp and cruel. But she was never alone with them again. People still talked, some always would. But others came to know her as the woman who laughed easily, who worked hard, who didn't flinch when the world looked at her sideways. They stopped calling her lame. They learned her name. One morning, months later, as sunlight poured through open windows and the land stretched green and wide, Maybelle stood in the doorway watching Ethan saddle a horse. "Winter didn't kill me," she said quietly. Ethan smiled without turning. "It doesn't kill what refuses to disappear." She stepped out into the warmth, crutches set aside, moving carefully but freely toward the life she'd chosen. And for the first time, the land didn't feel like something she had to survive. It felt like home.